In this video, I'm going to address many of the beliefs around schizophrenia and explain whether they are true or false. But firstly, what is schizophrenia? Schizophrenia is a mental illness that is often severe and debilitating. There are two types of symptoms of schizophrenia: positive symptoms and negative symptoms. Positive symptoms could be described as things that are added to a person that shouldn't be there. These are things like hallucinations and delusions. Negative symptoms can be described as things that are taken away from the person that should be there. These are things like a lack of motivation and social withdrawal. When a person is acutely unwell with schizophrenia, they are often said to be going through a psychotic episode. However, as psychosis is a very broad psychiatric term, many people can suffer with psychosis without being diagnosed with schizophrenia. Plus, people with other psychiatric illnesses, such as bipolar I, can also suffer with psychosis. So out of the next 12 statements, how many can you correctly identify as being true or false? Statement 1. People with schizophrenia have multiple personalities. This one is false. Having multiple personalities is the illness called Dissociative Identity Disorder, more commonly known as multiple personality disorder. People with dissociative identity disorder can suffer with psychosis alongside their personalities, but people with schizophrenia do not suffer with multiple personalities. If a person diagnosed with schizophrenia was found to have more than one personality, the diagnosis would probably be changed, but I couldn't say that for certain. Out of interest, if you are someone who believed that schizophrenia meant multiple personalities, think about where this belief came from. Without doing any research, why do you think schizophrenia means multiple personalities? Is it because of things you've heard from others, or through the media, or is it another reason? The myth originated from the Greek meaning of the word schizophrenia. Schizo means split and phrene means mind, meaning that schizophrenia roughly translates to split mind. However, the meaning was meant to convey how a mind is split from reality, not that the mind is split into multiple personalities. Unfortunately though, when the term schizophrenia was coined in 1911, the general public believed the name to mean multiple personalities. This misunderstanding has passed down through the generations, leading to the myth lasting for so long. Statement 2. People with schizophrenia are all dangerous. This one is also false. The vast majority of people with schizophrenia are either not dangerous at all, or only a danger to themselves. Statistically speaking, people with schizophrenia are around 3 or 4 times more likely to be violent than the general population. However, the percentage of people with schizophrenia who are violent and the percentage of people without schizophrenia who are violent are both extremely low, and saying 3 or 4 times more likely is misleading. Think about it this way: if 1 in 1,000 people with blonde hair had green eyes, but 2 in 1,000 people with blonde hair had blue eyes, statistically speaking, people with blonde hair would be twice as likely to have blue eyes. However, the percentages are so tiny that it will be misleading to say that, just as it is misleading to say that people with schizophrenia are 3 or 4 times more likely to be violent than the general population. People with schizophrenia are more likely to be the victim rather than the perpetrator of violent crime. The statistic for this is around 14 times more likely. Regardless of statistics though, the vast majority of both the general population and those with schizophrenia are not violent. This myth originated in the media, who seem to insist on only publicising negative stories about schizophrenia. In 2004 though, BBC News published a story that explained how just 30 to 50 murders a year, out of a total of 800, could be blamed on all mental illnesses. It went on to say that mental illness is a very low risk compared to the number of violent incidents involving alcohol. If the media could start publicising positive stories about schizophrenia, it might help to undo some of the damage it has caused to attitudes towards it. However, if news stories about schizophrenia continue to be only about the tiny minority with the illness who have committed a serious crime, the attitudes are only going to get worse. Statement 3. Schizophrenia is rare. Well, this depends on your own definition of the word rare. Medically speaking, a rare illness is defined differently across the world, anywhere from 0.05% to 0.0005% of the population. Schizophrenia affects around 1% of the global population, meaning that it is not medically defined as being rare anywhere in the world, making this statement false. It is actually more common than epilepsy and HIV. I don't really know where this myth originated from, but it doesn't seem to be that common a belief anymore anyway. Statement 4. All people with schizophrenia need medication. This statement is false. However, many people with schizophrenia find medication useful and continue to take it for years or even decades. However, antipsychotics, the normal type of medication given to people with schizophrenia, only help around 75 to 80% of people. This means 1 in 4 or 5 people will find it unhelpful. There are many people who have recovered from schizophrenia without the help of medication. I myself found that talking therapy helped me to recover. I had been on 5 different antipsychotics, including clozapine at various points, and didn't find any of them to be helpful. I have been off antipsychotics since November 2011, but I'm currently taking a low-dose antidepressant. The myth probably stems from the fact that once a person is diagnosed with schizophrenia, they are usually put on medication whether they want it or not. Schizophrenia always needs help, but doctors need to learn that medication isn't the be-all and end-all. It is possible to recover from schizophrenia without medication, but at the same time, many people can find medication to be a life-saving crutch for a short period of time, and then not need medication again. The bottom line is, treatment for schizophrenia should be as unique as the individuals themselves. Statement 5. Everyone with schizophrenia has the same symptoms. Again, this statement is false. Schizophrenia is a very broad psychiatric diagnosis, and there are currently 5 different subtypes of schizophrenia, alongside other schizophrenic diagnoses, such as schizoaffective and schizotypal. The most common type of schizophrenia is paranoid schizophrenia, which is the type most often heard on the news. And just like schizophrenia in general, paranoid schizophrenia does not mean a person is highly likely to be violent or dangerous. It is just heard more often on the news because it is the most common type of schizophrenia. The most common symptom of schizophrenia is hallucinations, particularly auditory hallucinations or voices, but many people with schizophrenia don't experience hallucinations at all. Delusions are also common in schizophrenia, but again, not all with the illness experience those either. Statement 6. Schizophrenia is more common in men than women. This statement is true, but only just. The average statistic is that men are around 1.4 times more likely than women to have schizophrenia. However, I have seen statements saying that men are far more likely to develop schizophrenia than women, but also that men and women are equally likely to develop schizophrenia. It is my personal belief that men are slightly more likely than women to develop schizophrenia, but at the end of the day, I don't think this really matters. Men seem to suffer with schizophrenia worse than women do, but again, it is important to always treat a sufferer as an individual. Statement 7. Psychotic means evil. How many times have you watched a television program and heard the phrase psychotic murderer? I've heard it several times, and I'm guessing many people will have heard it at least once. But hopefully you'll know now at this point that psychotic does not mean evil, nor does it mean murderous. A better synonym for psychotic would be confused, definitely not evil. Statement 8. Having schizophrenia means that your life is over. Definitely false. With the right treatment and support, people with schizophrenia can live independently, hold down jobs, raise a family, and be successful in numerous other ways. If you have been diagnosed with schizophrenia and have been told that your life is effectively over, you have been lied to. My advice is to stay away from the person or persons who told you that until they learn the truth. Statement 9. Many people with schizophrenia commit suicide. This depends on your definition of the word many, but it is true that far too many people with schizophrenia commit suicide. Statistics say that around 10% of people with schizophrenia commit suicide, and a further 40 to 60% attempt suicide at least once. These figures are shockingly high, but prove that people with schizophrenia are far more likely to be a danger to themselves rather than to others. Statement 10. Schizophrenia is linked to low intelligence. This statement is false. Schizophrenia doesn't seem to affect intelligence in any way. The percentages of people with schizophrenia with high and low intelligence seems to be the same as the rest of the population. However, as schizophrenia can affect concentration, memory, and other cognitive abilities, sufferers can be limited in their functioning and not be able to perform as well as they used to. This can be extremely frustrating for those with a high IQ who functioned well before their illness. Statement 11. People who hear voices telling them to harm others will always act on these commands. This statement is again false. Often when schizophrenia is in the news after a murder, it will be revealed that the culprit heard a voice telling them to kill the victim. I have no idea how many people hear voices telling them to harm or kill others, but acting on these commands really does seem to be the exception rather than the rule. I myself heard a voice which commanded me to kill others, but I didn't act on any of those commands. I acted on commands to harm myself, and I had a few suicide attempts due to this voice's commands, but not once did I harm another person. Statement 12. One of Einstein's children had schizophrenia. This statement is true. One of Albert Einstein's sons, Eduard, developed schizophrenia in 1930. This just goes to show that schizophrenia really can strike anyone, regardless of intelligence and fortune. If you would like more information about schizophrenia, check out my magazine at www.stillheremagazine.com or through the link in the description below. The link to my blog and Twitter is also in the description below, so feel free to send me a message if you'd like. Schizophrenia could be an awful illness to live with. Please don't add to a sufferer's struggles by believing the myths.